The closer the levels and floors are to the core, meaning the deeper into the center of the planet, the more manufactured and human made they look. The reason for this is because this is where most of the foundational engineering systems are located. Most of the systems are life support systems to generate the natural conditions on the surface. For example, most systems are spherical devices that have specific purpose driven functions with many layers like self maintenance, self repair memories, self monitoring, as well as redundancy and resiliency distributed networks. And then this comes with a visual that best explains it. Okay, so as you can see, this text is part of the book and it's describing the real engineering and design, the architecture of the structure of our planet, as what it truly is, which is a spaceship planet, a vessel of life that we manufactured. So, because there are so many levels and floors, and they go all the way from the surface to the core, then the deeper we get into the core, those levels, the more human looking they may. So for example, if you think of our surface where we are, the biosphere where I am right now, it's very natural looking. You look at it and there is nature everywhere. You see the sun, you see obviously, the sky, you can see everything, right? You can see everything outside, what we're used to on the surface. And it looks quite natural, right? It looks like nature made, right? What we call Mother Earth. But because this is a planet that we manufactured, the deeper you go into the levels, the more human made it looks. Meaning you can really see the engineering behind the planet, the inorganic foundation. You can see the actual infrastructure. You can see that this planet is in fact technology that is being manufactured by our species. So, and this is the case by design because it's engineering. So obviously, the crust, the surface is this beautiful biosphere, which is the end state, right? Is the result of all this engineering, of all this technology, all this human invention that comes together, and we observe it as what we see at nature. But the deeper we go, then we start to see the technology behind it, the infrastructure, what you would refer to as the back end, right? And this is essentially what empowers this beautiful looking nature that we surround ourselves with on the surface. And this is why the deeper you go into the levels, the closer to the core is where we have the rooms and the halls where we keep most of the life support systems. Because we're a spherical driven species, meaning the sphere is a creator, is infinite energy. So we decided that after understanding reality for what truly is, the best way to create a system of life support would be in a spherical way, which is essentially the way nature does it itself, reality, infinity. So most of the systems that we have that support, say, the oxygen levels on the surface and the self-regulation systems that we call the ecosystems, right? Everything that we have on the surface, this homeostasis, this biological synergy between all the different areas of the planet, the climate, the zones, the different, the weather patterns, everything that you see on the surface has to do with the systems that we have created, which are essentially, think of them as spherical devices, computers in a way, but highly sophisticated, highly advanced, extremely intelligent spherical devices. And each of these one has specific purposes, and the purposes are based on the tasks and the requirements of a specific system that 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 device looks after and takes care of, you see. And all these functions, you know because of the resiliency and the nature of the planet, the way we built it, is redundant. And because it's a sphere, it has to be a distributed network. So the deeper levels, the deepest of it, of the engineering, where we're housing all these spherical devices, and there's so many of them, billions of them, because these floors are huge, right? And if you walk around them as a human, you would see these spherical devices that are being housed on the floors of each of the levels at the very deepest, closest to the core. And it's essentially, the arrangements are symmetrical. Everything is done in a distributed manner in which is decentralized. So it's networks upon networks of devices that communicate with each other. Okay, and this is how the system of self-regulation happens. And these devices are so advanced that they have the ability to do self-maintenance. If there was something that needed to be repaired, it does it itself because it has memories that are capable of operating at that level of resiliency. So it doesn't need to have engineers and human personnel looking after the devices look after themselves. This is how sophisticated they are, because the way we build the materials of those devices, it's essentially, it has the ability of self-repair and maintenance. So if there is anything that happens, the system has memories of the real state, so it can simply just go back to the previous state if that was something that is required. And there is all sorts of mechanisms to essentially make sure that the monitoring is done in a way in which there is no corruption or corrosion or anything that has to do with failure of a systematic level, because the system is so robust, because we're so technologically advanced that we needed to create the conditions for the life support systems to essentially preserve life. So the technologies themselves have this notion of preservation. Of preservation of what? Of life. And because life is us and all the systems on the surface and everything that we have created in the universe, then it needs to make sure that that remains, right? And that's why it has this ability to preserve that. So it's life support system. So it understands the necessities. It understands the needs of the biological life forms that it supports, which is everything that exists in the universe that we created and all the other universes. So the system knows what is required for that to be preserved and sustained, and for it to thrive and have a natural process of evolution and sustainment, right? Because of that, it knows everything. So it knows what the ultimate levels are. So it focuses on that, and it maintains that in that way. So this is how this idea of self-regulation happens, because the system knows what the optimal levels are, because it understands everything. So it knows what to do. And if there was something that needed to be updated or optimized, it does it based on its own self-regulation memories. And because it's a distributed network, it has the latest update and live state of all systems for life support. So this is how it works. So in that way, it creates this natural condition of a system that is extremely robust, and it can essentially sustain this life form that we are and everything else that is on the surface. So this is how it works. It's a beautiful work of engineering, and it's all human technology.